Welcome to Practical Shooting Volume 6, the AR-15. I'm Matt Burkett, and we're here with Kevin Elpers, our perpetual student for the rest of the series. Kevin, we're going to be starting out learning about the equipment and tuning it up with John Paul from JP Enterprises, and then we're going to go and do an interview with Mark Buchanan, and Mark's going to help us set up the gear and learn about some of the ammo and the other issues we have with the rifles.
Great.
And then you and I will actually be shooting the rifles and teaching you how to do them right.
That'll be great.
Okay, so let's get started with that interview with John Paul. We're here with John Paul from JP Enterprises. JP makes some of the finest rifles for three-gun competition, tactical, carry, and duty. Let's take a look at some of these rifles. So, John, how did you get started with your company?
Well, it goes way back. Like a lot of young kids, my father got me into shooting. And he must have set the hook pretty good. I just couldn't get away from it. I remember one day I had a Daisy BB gun, and he made a sling out of my mother's belt for me. And so I was down in the basement shooting at little dinosaur models across the basement until there was enough BBs on the floor like it was a sheet of ball bearings. My mother didn't care for that too much.
Probably couldn't walk around too well on it.
No. So later on, I went to a military high school. And got into small bore, which is 22 rimfire with heavy barrel target rifles, that sort of thing, and did it all through high school and through college. And to this day, I consider myself more of a rifle shooter than a pistol or shotgun guy. Now, after I got out of school, I realized that, like you, I was unemployable and had to make my own job. So I took a look around and tried a lot of different things, and eventually I ended up in the firearms industry. Back in about 1978, actually. I had a retail gun store. And the funny thing is that I had a real aversion to the black guns. I really didn't have any on the shelf. I thought it would, my customers were primarily hunters, trap shooters, varmint hunters, and I kind of thought that these type of rifles might offend them, and I couldn't see any practical use for them, because I knew that the accuracy potential of them at the time, this was back in the 80s, was not what I considered rifle grade accuracy. Well, one day, a fella came in and I took a Colt AR-15 A1 Sporter in on trade. Now it had this the triangular forearm and the skinny little barrel on it.
Oh, the old school
right.
Of rifle,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I thought, well, you know, I took it to the range and said, let's see what this thing can do. And I was expecting maybe 2-3 MOA accuracy out of it, and it just kind of surprised me because it shot about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes with, you know, with factory ammo. And I thought, well, maybe this thing has some potential. And that was about the time that the free-floating type handguards, the tubular handguards, were coming out. And I ordered one of these things up, and it came in the mail, and weighed about 5 pounds. It was like a piece of pipe. It was steel. That was when everybody thought, well, heavy was better. So it's incredibly heavy handguard, and I installed this on this rifle and took it out, and by God, it was a sub-minute rifle with this skinny little barrel.
Just by changing the handguard?
Just by changing the handguard. I said, there's actually some potential here. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but the sport of tactical rifle competition was already in somewhat full swing with like the Soldier Fortune World Championship that went back many years. But these rifles were not being used by those people, and of course they were not being used in the NRA high power area. Everybody was pretty much hooked on 30 caliber rifles yet. Now, kind of ratchet forward there, it wasn't until about I'd say 1981 or 82 where I started to shoot action pistol, and IPSC first made its debut in Minnesota. And I started to shoot action pistol, and it was some years later actually that we had our first 3-gun match. And it was pretty obvious that these rifles were probably the only competitive type rifle for that game the way it was played, but they needed a lot of improvement.
Now, why do you think the AR style is the most competitive for that game?
Well, a number of reasons. First of all, with some changes like the handguard situation, the rifle had the accuracy potential to do what we needed to do. Secondly, the modularity of it, the fact that you could have different lowers and different uppers with different sight arrangements configured for different matches, so that made it a really versatile rifle.
Right,
and,
unlike the handgun where the top end is tied to the receiver, you can't just swap them out easily normally with any type of the custom handgun. On the rifles, it's really easy. You can have a varmint top end, a short range top end, and just pull out whatever you want to put on a bottom end.
Exactly, right. Yeah, the pistol, you're kind of stuck with what you got, unless you happen to be lucky enough to have a pistol with two top ends fitted to a lower, which is kind of the exception to the rule.
Right, and then one of them wears in, and it'll never, you know, it'll never fit the same again as the other one will.
These are kind of like potato chips. You just can't have one. Most people who get into this will have, if you went up to my office, I've got, it looks like a closet of ARs. I've got, you know, various lowers configured in different fashions and a whole rack of uppers. And of course, I'm in the business. I'm lucky enough to, to be able to have that as part of
You probably
what
have
I
a
do.
few extra ones laying around for yourself, huh?
But yeah, just amazing what you can do and with the versatility of what you can, the different configurations. So that I think is one of the biggest reasons, and reliability. Once the one is properly set up with good components, they're extremely reliable. So those, the accuracy, the versatility, and reliability are probably the three things that I think made the rifle so well suited for action rifle competition or tactical rifle use as we know it.
So John, what was the progression of parts you came out with for the rifles in the competition and the tactical area?
Man, I felt that the rifle had three main areas to address. First being the recoil impulse, secondly the trigger or fire control mechanism, and finally the accuracy issue.
Okay.
First, let me talk a little bit about the recoil impulse. The first product we had was actually the recoil eliminator, we called it. I designed it primarily for large caliber bolt guns, where you really had significant recoil to get rid of from the comfort standpoint. Now, that's not an issue on these rifles, but the sight recovery and controllability is. So a lot of people don't realize that there's two components to the recoil impulse. One is produced when the bullet leaves the barrel, just physics, action, reaction.
Right.
And the second one is due to the operating system.
The bolt slamming to the rear causes a significant amount of motion in the gun itself.
I'd say it's about half of the felt impulse on these rifles is due to the whole reciprocating mass issue in the rifle. Now, typically military M16s are overgassed so that they're more reliable in a combat situation where the chamber may be dirty, the gas system may be dirty, there may be fouling in the receiver, and you got to overcome all of that. But on a game gun that's well maintained, you can get away with some hanky-panky. So we put an adjustable gas system on it first off.
Now, a lot of people watching this might not know that it's a gas-operated gun.
That's right.
So the gas is actually, there's a hole in the barrel, and it comes up out of that hole and pushes the bolt back, unlocks it, pushes it back, and that's actually what cycles the gun. It's not a blowback type of rifle.
That's right. Anything that operates at this pressure would have to have a lock breech. So it's what we call gas operated, and a small amount of gas is bled off of the barrel, just as you said. It's directed into the bolt carrier, causing that to, we'll do a cam slot to unlock the bolt, and then the bolt carrier is actually a kinetic energy storage device that contains enough kinetic energy to cause the bolt to extract the fired case, come all the way back, eject it, and then pick up the next round and strip and feed it from the magazine and go all the way back in the battery and repeat that cycle.
Right, and in that area, you've actually modified it in two ways. You've modified the gas system by being able to control how much gas goes into it in the first place, and then you've also modified the bolts and changed the weight of the bolts.
Right, the bolt carrier more specifically.
Bolt carrier,
right.
yeah, because not the bolt. The bolt is the head on the front of
Right,
it, right?
right. The bolt carrier, we can get away with some games there, but the bolt itself, we're sticking to the mil-spec design there because there's a good reason for the material and the design of it.
Right.
But the bolt carrier, there again, the original bolts their bolt carriers are very heavy, and they actually store a lot more energy than you need. And of course, on an overgassed gun, you've got all this mass coming back at you, and it bottoms out against the buffer in the buttstock, and you feel that against your shoulder as a real significant part of the overall impulse. So first off, by just taking the adjustable gas system and slowing it down a bit, you get rid of a lot of that excess energy that you're feeling.
It's almost like a secondary recoil.
Right.
When the gun goes off, you'll see the initial push from it, and then you get this slapping action happening from the bolt hitting the stock.
Yeah, and all of that takes time. You don't perceive it when you're actually shooting the gun, but that time limits your sight recovery, so that if you can compress that time of the rifle cycling, it actually improves the sight recovery beyond just getting rid of the initial recoil impulse. It improves the time span that the impulse takes. So that we get into the second issue of altering the mass of the reciprocating parts. really, by slowing it down, it lengthens that period. We really don't want that. It gets rid of the excess energy, so it makes the rifle feel smoother. But on the downside of that, now it takes longer to cycle.
Good chunk. Good chunk.
Yeah, right. And you will actually feel that. If you take a full mass operating system and turn the gas down to minimal, you can actually perceive every part of the operating cycle, the thing unlocking and coming back and just stopping and coming forward. And in the perception of a skilled action shooter, that might be an eternity.
It does feel like it takes forever because I've done that. Yeah.
So by reducing the mass of the operating system to a point where it still has adequate kinetic energy to do what it has to do, but yet speeds up this whole cycle. Now, with this low mass operating system, it almost feels like a bolt action with a compensator. There's actually no perception of the rifle actually cycling, or very little.
Right. So that addresses using the gas effectively in the compensator area, using it effectively here, and then getting rid of all the extra action in the back that happens in the back end of the gun. Because I know when I shoot your guns, they almost don't move at all. When I got in the last one, it was really interesting for me because when I took it out at first, I was like, bang! I'm like, wow, this thing's kicking all over the place. And it had the muzzle brake and everything, but I hadn't adjusted it on the gas system to tune it for the round I was shooting.
There you go.
Now, how do you go about tuning that for the round you're going to be shooting? Because you need to customize the gun to the load, right?
That's right. And a guy can get himself in some trouble there by not having enough gas, because I've done it.
Right. If you don't have enough gas, the bolt isn't going to cycle to the rear all the way and pick up the next round, or the bolt won't even lock back on an empty mag. Right.
For our game, you really want to bias it towards reliability. In other words, the rifle has to be a little bit over-gassed. If you're a varmint shooter and the gun doesn't absolutely have to work and you want to get the maximum effect, well, you can tune it to the last nth degree and not worry about the reliability issue.
Well, you can actually shut the gas off, can't you?
You can shut it off and run it manually, right?
And you could actually just hand cycle it, which could keep you on the gun, completely in the target for varmint hunting or something like that. It'd never even move off of there with the compensator you guys sell.
Yeah, some people do that, or for example, at a bench situation where you don't want to pepper the guy next to you with brass, they might.
Well, that's kind of fun, though.
Depends on what kind of a sadist you are.
Yeah. The next area you worked on was the fire control system, right?
That was the next really glaring shortcoming of the rifle. The standard trigger parts were just horrible. Typically 7, 8, 9 pounds with about a mile of gravel in there. A lot of these triggers stopped about 3, 4 times before they finally released, kind of a guessing game. So the common wisdom out there was that it was impossible to make a reliable single-stage fire control system. And maybe now's a good time to discuss the difference between these.
Well, yeah, all of the ARs and M15s and XM15s and all the different ones ship with a single-stage system in them. Two-stage system is where there is trigger movement first before sear engagement, and it swings. You can swing through it and play with it first, prep it up as it were, and then break the shot. Single stage, there is no pre-travel. It just breaks right there.
Right. We don't have any spring-loaded take-up. And there is some great two-stage triggers out there, the Krieger Milazzo, Jewel triggers. There's several of them out there that really do an excellent job of that. And in the high-power game, I'd say two-stage triggers probably are still the trigger of choice, although more and more people are starting to convert over to the single-stage concept. We addressed the problems that were inherent in the single-stage trigger. There was a number of people doing trigger jobs using standard parts by either putting screws in the receiver to tighten up the over travel and engagement setting, or putting them on the trigger themselves. And though in fact there was a shop up where we were locally, a J&S Custom, who was doing a trigger job on these rifles just by putting a couple of set screw collars on the trigger and getting a relatively short overall engagement and reset feel to the trigger. However, due to the sear geometry of the original parts and the metallurgy of the trigger, well, it was hard to get a reliable or long-term durability.
Yeah, they wouldn't last. All of a sudden, your gun goes burp instead of bang.
That's right. So we addressed all those problems and redesigned that whole system so that we had a sear geometry and a metallurgy that really made a very reliable and durable system with a very, very short reset. And that reset is one of the things that guys like us are really turns us on. They typically talk to an action shooter. It's not so much the fact that it's got that clean break, it's the fact that the reset is so short and precise.
Right, it's got to be crisp coming back. With my shooting, what I've noticed is if I've got a stage where it's under 100 yards, I really prefer a single stage trigger because I can really crank on it, you know, and hammer it. I go back and forth kind of between the single and two-stage designs for anything out to 300 yards because I like the ability to play with the trigger a little bit on that kind of a target. So, you know, I kind of set them up almost per match. I've got a bunch of extra guns and parts too. And so if I'm going to mainly a long-range match, sometimes, depending on the level of tension I have, I want to have a little extra something to play with there before breaking the shot. So, you know, having options when you're setting up your guns is really critical.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of these things is that you can just combine components to come up with exactly the right configuration for a particular event.
Right, and whereas most people, they want to go buy the one rifle. And there is no such thing for this shooting.
No.
You know, I mean, I might run a 16-inch gun at one match, and I might want a 24-inch gun at the next match, you know, or a 20-inch gun is what I run up at the Ironman up in Idaho. Because you shoot out to like 400 to 500 yards off of a tower that's moving like this. If you got a little tiny rifle, that doesn't work so well sometimes. Everything's too whippy. You don't get anything to calm down.
Sure, yeah, I do the same thing. The more the accuracy requirement of the event, the more I'll bias towards a little bit heavier gun, a little bit more stability, and sacrifice some of the maneuverability of it.
John, the third area that you brought up was how you've worked on improving the accuracy of the rifles.
Right. You've got that accuracy reliability compromise, and we wanted to find out where we could push that. So with the right barrel materials, the right type of chambering and contouring, various contours that we experimented with, and also specialized methods of mounting the barrels into receivers, we were able to get the accuracy equation kind of biased towards the almost what I would call bolt gun accuracy while still maintaining really very good reliability. If you remember in 1911s when people first started to build bullseye guns, well, yeah, you could make one shoot accurately, but it wouldn't work.
No, it'd never work.
So, and you can do that same thing here. Having a chamber that's too tight, et cetera, you can bias the rifle towards the accuracy extreme, but yet it's just not going to work on a real world situations. So the question is, well, how liberal can you make the chamber? Where should the throat be, and still be able to tolerate a little bit of dirt and keep the rifle working, but yet have that accuracy in the sub-minute area. In fact, it's not too uncommon with really good match-grade ammo that reloaders would use, that they get into that quarter-minute range, which I think is about the accuracy limitation of the platform.
One of the things you brought up was the chamber area. There's a 223 chamber and a 556 chamber, the NATO spec chamber. Most people don't know that these are actually slightly different, aren't they?
That's right.
You know, so 223 will go in the 556, no problem, but the 556 doesn't go in the 223 very well.
Well, that's a good way of looking at it, to sum it up in a nutshell. There's a lot of 556 ammo that would not be safe, say, in a commercial 223 chamber because, first off, the throat in a commercial 223 chamber is extremely short. So then you end up with a pressure problem with some NATO, 556 NATO type ammo. And that's typically the scenario that people find themselves in.
Right. Now, some of the people don't know some of the terminology we're working with. The throat is right where the bullet engages the rifling inside the barrel.
Right. It's an area of the barrel where the rifling is partially removed to allow the bullet to jump into the rifling.
Right. And in the military ones, they open up that throat so they don't have function issues. Is that the primary reason?
Well, also to accommodate projectile configurations that are a little bit different than, say, what might be found in commercial factory ammunition. Bullets with different ogives, et cetera, that need a longer throat so that the bullet is not pre-engraved into the rifling, which creates a pressure issue.
Okay. Now, moving on from the 223 and 556 chamber, the next thing in the barrel is really the twist rate.
Right.
You know, we've got a bunch of different twist rates, everything from 1 in 7 all the way to 1 in 14.
When 22 centerfire cartridges first evolved, like the 222 and some of these cartridges, 12 and 14 twist barrels were common. In other words, one rotation in either 12 or 14 inches of barrel. Now, the slower that twist rate is, the lighter the bullet has to be that you intend to stabilize. So you take the original M16s and AR-15s, they had 12 twist barrels, which would not stabilize projectiles much heavier than 55 grains.
Well, actually, the bullets were extremely unstable in that time frame. The very first ones that were used over in Vietnam were a 1 in 14 twist. and when they hit anything, the bullet immediately tumbled, which is where it became the real bad name of the black rifle.
Right. That was the that was the thought, that you want to just minimally stabilize the projectiles and to cause the most damage.
Right. Right.
Now, to improve the ballistics of the rifle, well, we wanted to go to heavier, more efficient, ballistically efficient projectiles, and then we had to get more rapid rates of twist.
Okay. Now, what for the people out there that are just going out to buy their first gun, what barrel twist would you recommend as the best all-around one to work with?
I think the industry in general has kind of settled on 1 and 9 as being the most versatile rate of twist, because it'll stabilize anything from bullets in the 45 grain range all the way up to the 69, 68 grain match projectiles, like the Sierra and Hornady and these bullets designed for long range match shooting.
Right. I actually generally get either a 1 and 7 or a 1 and 8 twist. I don't shoot anything in the competition less than 55 grains generally. And for the long-range shooting over 200 yards, I actually use the 77s, because it's almost never 2 shots on the same target. It's always engage one target, move on, and they dump so much more energy on target that it's amazing. The foot-pounds on a target on a metal plate is incredibly improved over a standard 55 grain bullet.
No question about it. In fact, it's a 77 grain match bullet has about twice the retained energy at 500 yards as your typical 55 grain ball. So it's a huge amount of downrange horsepower that you can put out there. The 8 twist barrel is ideal for that, and we found that the 8 twist barrel gives the equivalent accuracy with 55 grain bullets as in 1 and 9, but vastly improved when you get into bullets heavier than 70 grains. I don't think that they do quite as well with bullets under 55 grains, but see, in our sport, hardly anybody uses ammunition with the lighter weight projectiles, whereas a varmint shooter might.
Right. If you're going to be going varmint hunting with your AR, go with a 1 and 10 to a 1 and 14 twist, then you can go buy there's factory 40 grain ammo out there that you can just buy if you're not going to reload it.
Right.
And it'll stabilize that stuff great. The barrel length, we see everything from 16 to 24 inches. If you're varmint hunting, a 24-inch barrel sounds like a great idea, but if you're moving around, that becomes really awkward because you have a tendency to catch it on everything. You seem to have settled on the 18-inch area.
18s and 20s, we do offer 24s, but there again, it gets to become more of a limited purpose rifle for someone who tends to be shooting off bipod or off a bench where you're not going to be hauling this thing around, because it gets to be quite a tank. 24-inch heavy barreled rifle with optics and everything, we're talking 12, 13 pounds, and you better have lifted your weights.
It's kind of hard to run with.
Also, it's kind of interesting, in my experiments, I've found that the most accurate setup we have is one of these 20-inch medium contour barrels. Harmonically, it just seems to work out, and I've gotten our best test groups out of actually the lighter weight barrels.
What's the tightest group you've ever gotten at the factory?
172,
.172 of an inch.
At 100 yards, out of an 8 twist with a Sierra 69 grain match.
Yeah, there's probably some people that are doing the long range competitions that are kind of jealous of that.
Yeah, when you start getting under .2, well, you could argue that you're getting into the bench rest accuracy range, you know. So it amazes me that what these things are actually capable of.
And still function.
And still function.
Yeah, versus the other ones that are extremely accurate and don't function. And then there's some of the rifles on the market that aren't accurate and don't function, which a lot of the lower end type of ARs have that problem too. They seem to be able to be fixed up if you get them gassed right, play with the bolt, and all that to kind of tune the rifle. Which brings us to the next area, tuning up the AR.
You know, if your rifle has a good barrel in it, you're right, you can probably get it to work. I mean, the barrel's kind of the heart of the thing, and if you've got a barrel that's got a defective chamber, you've probably got a problem.
It's time to buy a different barrel
Right.
if it's got a screwed up chamber.
But assuming that your barrel is good and your chamber is good, in other words, it doesn't have reamer marks or some abnormalities in there that sees the case in there, then getting the rifle to shoot reliably is a matter of tuning. Getting it to shoot accurately, there may be some other issues that you might have to address there.
Well, you can go everything from the crown and all that, but their gunsmith can handle that if they're just getting into it.
Generally, yeah, the crown, or sometimes if you get something that just doesn't seem to want to shoot, or possibly kind of a typical scenario is you maybe got a barrel that seems to shoot one particular load and nothing else. That's usually a harmonics issue, and a lot of times you knock half an inch off a barrel like that, all of a sudden it'll just shoot.
I know in the 22s, the 223 is just a 22 caliber bullet. They can be extremely ammo sensitive. You know, they might shoot a 1/4 inch with one type of load, and the next load might be a 3/4 inch gun.
every rifle has its personality. There's no doubt about that. And you've got to kind of find, if you're going to shoot factory, find something that is going to work in your particular rifle. If you're going to load, well, a lot of people load. There's a certain personal satisfaction. I do it, even though it's certainly less expensive for me to shoot factory. Nowadays, 223 ammunition has become, the generic stuff has gotten so cheap that a lot of people think it's hard to justify reloading, but I think there's plenty of reasons for it.
Well, I've seen a lot of people get into some tricky areas with reloading that aren't versed enough in what it takes to make a semi-auto run with their ammo. You know, they'll use their brass too many times. The next thing you'll have case separations and other things like that. You know, for the guys just starting out, I think reload or even remanufactured ammo from a company like Black Hills is a great idea. That's actually what I shoot in competition most of the time, because I can just buy it by the case and I don't have to mess with it. I've got enough other things to keep track of when I'm trying to shoot a 3-gun match.
Me too. If I don't have time to reload, I use the Black Hills. I found that to be extremely reliable, and the accuracy is very close on a par to my hand loads if I buy like their match loads. The thing about understanding the reloading, that's a really good point, because I'd say about 90% of malfunctions for the average shooter are usually ammo related.
Right.
And a lot of people don't understand that, especially in a gas operated or a semi-automatic rifle, that rifle becomes it's a part of the rifle. I mean, it has to be within specification to be stripped, fed, chambered, and all of that. It's actually part of the mechanism, not just around like in a bolt gun where you can put it in, and as long as you've got enough muscle, you can force a case that's too fat into that chamber and fire it.
Right. It doesn't work that way on these. Now, I noticed you don't flute your barrels at your company. You change the outside dimension of them. You make them thinner or thicker and everything else, but you don't actually do any fluting, which is pretty standard in the industry.
We did it one time too. And the more we experimented, the more our barrels evolved, we found that the fluting was a little bit more of a risky process. I mean, it's cosmetically, it's great, and I think that's one of the main reasons that people like it, is it just looks cool. But we found that our accuracy was overall more predictable when we recontoured to save weight as opposed to fluting.
Now, they did a couple of things with fluting. The idea was, first, it was cosmetic. Second, it was weight savings. And third, it increased the surface area for cooling. Now, one of the problems I ran into on some fluted barrels, if they weren't relieved properly, when they heated up, next thing you know, the barrel's bending and walking all over the place, and your groups kind of get crazy out there.
Right. I think of that as first shot predictability. Typically, in a lot of barrels, especially police snipers, at a lot of sniper matches, the whole question is, where does that cold shot go?
Oh yeah, cold bore shot is everything in that world.
So we, as standard on all our, we would like to have all our barrels cryogenically treated, and what we found is that gives us real good first shot predictability. In other words, the cold shot is in the group, and even after they get hot, the group doesn't drift.
Okay, now you've addressed the heating problem on the really thin barrels you have with a cooling system of some sort, right?
Yeah, instead of fluting the barrels to increase surface area, we came up with an extruded aluminum finned sleeve that attaches to the barrel underneath the handguard, and that gives you a huge amount of surface area, plus the aluminum has a higher heat conductivity rate than the steel does anyway. So by putting that on there, about a 7-fold increase in surface area, and drastically improves the heat capacity of the barrel. So like in a high round count stage, or like a varmint shooter who might want to go out there and burn hundreds of rounds, hour after hour, it gives you the ability to do that without damaging the barrel.
One of the things I use in the sniper competition is actually a laser temperature sensor. What barrel temp have you figured out? Is there a barrel temp that you shouldn't go beyond as far as when the damage would start happening to the barrels? Actually,
you can heat a barrel up considerably. I think that when you start approaching about 300 degrees or so, then you start changing the temper of the material.
That's really the change that happens in the barrel, is
right.
when you actually change the temper of the material, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And you don't want to change the metallurgical properties of the barrel, because that is specified from the start to give the best there again, compromise between barrel life, durability, and its ability to handle excess pressure if that is necessary.
Okay, great.
So Matt, have we talked about barrel break-in yet?
I'm sure that's a pretty important thing for a lot of people out there, because nearly everybody thinks about barrel break-ins, and a lot of people, I think, take it way too seriously with the high-quality barrels we have on the market these days.
I'd agree. I think that the quality of the barrels, the machine processes have improved to the point where the internal finishes are such that break-in procedures have been somewhat minimalized. But a lot of people want to do this, and if it makes you feel good, I think you should do it.
Well, if it makes you happy, go right ahead. Normally what I do when I do get a gun in is I clean the gun before I shoot it, just in case. You never know, there might be packing material in there, or they might have packed it in grease and stuff like that. It's something really important to do, is clean the gun right off the bat. Then personally, I'll actually do a clean and shoot for 5 rounds, that's it. And then I'll just shoot the gun, because I really don't have the time to waste on doing it for 2 to 3 hours, not to mention most of the top barrel manufacturers recommend you don't do it.
Yeah, with the rifles, I've had a chance to shoot a lot of these uppers, and I found that a lot of them will shoot to their accuracy potential almost immediately. Whereas sometimes I might have to put as many as 200 to 300 rounds through them before they finally really come in. And I'll also use the JB bore paste initially and fire maybe 10 to 20 rounds, and then use that paste worked into a patch that's soaked in solvent, and on a nice tight jag, and run that up and down the bore about a dozen times or so, and then do the same thing, maybe repeat that about 2-3 times.
Okay. Well, you know, on the new barrels, one of the things that can happen, since they're stainless, you can actually over-clean them, right?
That's right. Yeah, some people get too carried away on cleaning these barrels, and you end up actually doing more damage from over-cleaning them for a variety of reasons. For example, damaging the crown. It's very easy to ruin your crown by, especially if you clean from the muzzle, which I don't recommend. You should usually be cleaning from the breech, using some kind of a device to center up the cleaning rod. We make a bore guide that does that, and a lot of companies make those for bolt-action rifles too.
There's only one type of gun that you should really clean from the muzzle, and that's one you can't actually disassemble, which is like a 10-22 type rifle, which you used to make these things.
Right.
You don't make 10-22s anymore.
We're just so busy with the rest of this, we don't have the time anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had to draw the line somewhere, and you know, we decided we would specialize in what we did best.
Well, I'm glad I got one of yours before that. If you're gonna clean from the muzzle, make sure you have a bore guide or a muzzle protector to protect that rod when you're doing it from impacting into the crown area.
All right, the last thing you want to do is drag the rod on the very edge of the crown, because once you've destroyed the crown, your accuracy will degrade.
Yeah, significantly. If you're cleaning from the chamber end, here's one of the JP bore guides. One of the very first ones. I think I've had this for almost 8-10 years.
That's an early one.
And you take and you insert that into the chamber, and that protects the chamber from getting any damage into the throat area, or the you know, where the case sits, and scratching it all up. Pretty important to have one of those.
Plus, it keeps your patch on there. There's nothing like trying to chase your patch through that long receiver of these AR-15 type rifles.
Right. Well, you know what? Let's talk about cleaning and maintenance next.
Okay.
Now, John, let's help them learn how to clean and maintain their guns. So why don't you break down the rifle for me and show them what it takes to do that.
Well, this rifle is simply held in place by the 2 push pins, and so a disassembly is just as simple as that. We also make a tension pin that fits back here that pulls the whole upper down and back into the lower, giving you kind of a rock-hard tension fit. That takes a little bit more doing to get that in and out. You have to have an Allen key.
Now, the tension pin, if you've got a bunch of different top ends for your gun, they may not match up really well, so you might end up with one really sloppy.
Some can be very sloppy.
Yeah, especially from different manufacturers. They might have different tolerances, different specifications, and that takes care of that, so you can still put any top end on there, still have a tight feeling gun. Okay, where do we go from here?
Then we're going to take out the bolt and carry assembly and a charging handle. It's simply by unlocking the charging handle. Now I can pull the bolt and carry assembly completely out, and the charging handle comes out like that. Now the upper receiver is completely empty, so we can take this little cleaning rod guide and insert that in there. That allows us to clean from the breech without damaging the chamber or the throat.
Yeah, that's your bore guide we were working with. Now let's take the bolt here, and you haven't cleaned this one lately, have you?
No, I am kind of remiss. Now, if you have a tip of a bullet, or sometimes you can actually pull this little cotter pin out of here with your fingers. That is what retains the whole, it keeps the whole thing in assembly. That retains the firing pin. So if we pull that out, we just tap it, and our firing pin's going to fall right out. Now we can turn the cam pin. This little thing here is called the cam pin.
let's see, can make sure they can see that right there. We can rotate that till it's in line with the gun, right?
You rotate that so that it just clears the key. This is called the carrier key, and that'll pull right out, and now the bolt will come all the way forward. And so now you completely disassemble the bolt and carrier assembly.
Now, what are the important things to keep an eye on your bolt carrier and your bolt are obviously your extractor spring,
Right.
the gas rings, and your firing pin for any damage, right?
And the ejector.
The ejector's in there
This is
too?
your ejector pin, and sometimes the ejector pin hole will be fouled up with brass shavings.
Okay, so
Just a good test. You want to take that, you can take your firing pin and press on the end of that ejector, make sure that it goes in and out of the bolt freely and is not bound up by any brass shavings that may have migrated their way around that ejector pin.
okay. Let's see if we can get them a nice close shot of that being depressed there. Okay. So that's the ejector pin there. There's your extractor. So what we're going to do is just take and press in on that and make sure it's got a good rebound to it. Okay? So now how do you clean those up?
I brought the right rifle, didn't I?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Thanks, John.
Right here, these are called the gas rings. And you want to inspect those to make sure that there's no piece missing, or there's not a crack, or that one of those gas rings is not protruding from this groove excessively, that they're in good shape.
Now, the other thing I know is you don't want the little notches, which it's going to be hard to pick up on camera, but there's little notches in these gas rings, and you don't want those lined up all the way straight across, right?
If they all line up at once, well, then you've got a leak. There's a gas ring out there called the McFarland gas ring, which is a one continuous coil, and that's designed to solve that problem. A lot of people use that. I've used them in some of our rifles.
Now, how often should the gas springs be replaced? Because that's a real maintenance issue. A lot of people,
Right.
their guns are working great, and then all of a sudden it just starts screwing up, and they don't know what's going on.
Well, the gas rings are a very inexpensive part, and personally, I think that for what they cost, it's a good idea to change them out about every 1,000 rounds.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they're like $5 or something, aren't they?
Probably less than that in some cases.
Yeah.
So.
Now, is there a little gas ring tool that they can get?
There probably is.
Or do you just
Actually, they're
pop
fairly
them
easy
off?
to put them on there with the one piece, the McFarland. It helps to have a dental pick. Once you start it, you can kind of curl it on there. These actually can be put into the groove. They're fairly easy with a dental pick or something like that.
Okay. How often should you change the extractor spring?
The maintenance cycle on that is
I'm going to let you handle the bolt.
well. For our purposes, I'm not going to take that.
Right, but the pinhole is right here.
Right, and here's your pivot pin for the extractor.
Okay.
Which you would knock out, and that would release the extractor. And there's a spring and a little rubber cushion that goes underneath there that gives the proper extractor tension. And you can check that too. This should be quite stiff, and you should take quite a bit of force to push that extractor out of the breech face there.
Okay. So that's the basic maintenance on the bolt itself.
Yeah, and you want to take your toothbrush, clean all this off. Also clean inside the bolt face here, because you're going to have carbon built up there, and you're going to have miscellaneous brass filings. You want to get all of that out of there. And it's a good idea to have, like, if you have a can of Birchwood Casey gun scrubber, or if you're lucky enough to have a solvent tank, better yet.
Or one of the ultrasonic cleaners.
Oh, that'd be great.
Those are great for dropping these kind of parts in. That takes care of the bolt and what you need to do on that. What do we need to do on the carrier?
The carrier, you want to use a brush to get inside the carrier and remove the fouling that will accumulate inside the bore of the carrier.
Now this is actually just, it's a 30 caliber chamber brush that we're using, but that'll actually get in there fairly well. But I mean, you'd want something a little bigger to get way deep into the product.
It's about a 1/2 inch bore, so you want a brush that's just slightly longer than there to get inside here and rotate that to get all that carbon buildup that will accumulate inside the bore of the carrier. Some people will actually take a small brush and go inside the key here and clean that out.
They use a pipe cleaner, I think.
Yeah, pipe cleaner.
Then they also use it on the actual gas tube. sometimes they take and clean out the end of that with it because there's some carbon buildup back there.
I think people get a little over concerned about that because at the pressures we're dealing with,
It's going to blow right past that stuff anyway.
yeah, that stuff is usually taken out. With certain ball powders, there was an issue of calcium buildup actually inside the gas tube.
Okay.
And that was what happened during the Vietnam era when because the whole system was designed around an extruded powder, and later on, ammunition was being loaded with a ball powder, which caused this calcium buildup in the gas tube and led to some of the reliability issues that the rifle experienced.
Now, on the we're going to take and put that back together. Do you put any lubricant on the bolt itself?
I generally lube them in assembly. These are the gas bleed-off holes here.
Okay.
And I'll put a drop of oil in there and then work the bolt back and forth.
So you need a drop of oil in these two holes?
Right. And
Okay.
you don't even have to take the rifle apart to do that.
Okay.
In fact, at a match, when I'm using this low mass operating system, I'll actually put a drop of oil in here between every stage just to keep it. What that does is it causes the gas rings to slough off the carbon buildup there and make sure that this whole system stays relatively friction free.
Okay. Then where do you place oil on the actual carrier?
On the bearing ways, first off, most of the force of the carrier is being pressed up into the receiver by the column of ammunition in the magazine under spring tension. So that's why when you look at the typical carrier, most of the wear is right on the top two edges.
Okay. Yeah, you're going to see it here and then here, right?
Right.
Okay.
But this is one of the primaries for lubrication, and of course the bottom ways certainly. The other place that I would definitely use some kind of a oil or possibly even a grease is on the cam pin, which goes in the cam slot here. When you put this back in here, you got to orientate the bolts so that the ejector is down at about 5 o'clock. And then you put your cam pin back in and rotate it so that the firing pin channel is again in line with the bolt. And we're not going to clean this thing up thoroughly here, but we're just going to reassemble it. So now we put your firing pin back in, reinsert your cotter pin. There's kind of a trick to this too. If you put it in there and then press it
Towards the
bottom of the bolt, then it'll align itself in the channel and kind of close itself up so that it allows you to put it all the way through so that it'll insert through the other side.
I know to have some extra cotter pins around because if one gets inside of there and bends out like this,
that's it. Right.
It's done for.
Throw it away.
It's a 3-cent part. Just get another one.
Right. Yeah. If that ever happens, if you ever misshape the cotter pin, you definitely want to get rid of that. And you always want to make sure that both legs of that cotter pin have protruded through the other side. If one of them has wrapped itself around inside here, what that's going to do is lock the firing pin in position. And what may happen is that firing pin will be locked in the forward position. We've seen this, and it will actually, as the rifle comes just into battery, the pin starts extruding before the rifle is actually in battery, and you could have a premature detonation of the round before the rifle is ready for that pressure to build up.
Now we're going to help you learn how to clean the barrel. So I brought along my cleaning rods, which are actually Dewey rods, and I keep one of these caddies available to protect the rods, because the one thing you don't want to do is have your cleaning rod get impregnated with any type of abrasive that'll actually take and scratch up the bore of the gun.
That's not good.
So one of them has what we call a jag, which is what you place the little cotton patches on, and we got a brush on the other one. I like keeping two of them. I mean, it's just a couple extra bucks, but when you use it that way, you don't have to constantly screw the things on and off.
Right. Save some time there, and less likely to lose one of these parts or bend it.
Yeah, it's really hard to find a jag when you're in a small town.
Especially the size you need.
Yeah, exactly.
I usually like to start out with the brush.
Okay.
And I'll put some solvent on it and run that up and down a few times, and then let it sit for a few minutes so that that solvent will have a chance to work on the bore. So with this thing inserted there,
and you can see it takes a little bit of work to get that brush through.
especially the first time through. Because
the first time through, this thing's nice and nice and dirty right now because John was kind of probably doing a stress test on this gun. And
Well, this rifle's been through a couple of matches here and whatnot, so it's had quite a bit of use.
now, one of the things I like to do is I buy these extra bottles. A bunch of different companies have them. As you can see, the solvent still does a number on these things. But these keep the solvent from running all over the table. I mean, it's like $4. Buy your stuff in bulk, all your cleaning supplies, and then use a little bit of it at a time. And it's a whole lot cheaper in the long run. So let's use. Well, I'll actually clean this thing up for you here.
It needs it.
By the way, if you use towels at home, don't use your wife's. She'll know. Okay, there you go. It's already easier to get in and out of there, isn't it? Now we're going to take a jag probably and push a patch through there.
Normally I'd let it sit for a few minutes before I did this because the solvent needs a little bit of time to work.
Yeah. Now the solvent that I use is the Butch's Borshine, and it works great. It takes an amazing amount of crud out of the barrel and really wipes that copper and fouling out of there. One of the handier things to use is a little rest.
Ooh, look at that.
There's a nice close-up shot for you right there. You can see that barrel needed a little bit of cleaning on it because he shot a few rounds through it.
And even with all that fouling, it would still shoot very accurately.
Oh, it still hold way under a minute.
Right.
Okay. Now, how important is it to get these barrels extremely clean?
You're never going to get all of it out of there.
Right. In fact, you'll probably drive yourself insane if you try to get it all out of there because it's going to always have something coming out on that patch.
Some people get obsessed with this.
Yeah, I spend 5 hours cleaning my AR barrel.
And too much of that, you can wear out a good barrel too.
Well, we talked about the over-cleaning process. Now, you see this barrel actually cleans up pretty fast. Get another little close-up shot there. That's just a few patches in, and boy, it's really cleaning up really quick.
Yeah, I would say just a couple more cycles here, and this one is going to be ready for more abuse.
Now, my process on my .308 rifles is to take and run. I run usually 3 wet patches, and really loose. On the bigger patches for the larger bores, you can take and center the patch differently on the rod itself, and this will give you a looser fit inside of the bore, so it won't be as tight going through the first couple of times. Keep them really wet and loose. Run them through there, let it soak up for a while, then I'll do 15 strokes with a brush, a wet brush, and then another 6 patches, 10 strokes with a wet brush, another 3 patches, and then I'll start running dry patches, and it pretty much will be incredibly clean at that point. It takes about 5 minutes to do if you've got 2 rods and everything set up.
Yeah, normally I would spend a little bit more time with the brush initially too.
Yeah, but I mean, even so, there's a little bit of gunk in there. Let's see if we can see that right there. So, even so, that gun will run great at this point. Now, after you've cleaned the barrel, we want to work to the back end of the gun into the receiver area, right?
Right, next thing I would do would be to mop out that chamber. Now, with a lot of rifles, in fact, we ship one with every one. We ship one of these chamber brushes that not only cleans the chamber, but this larger section here brushes any debris out of the locking lug area. So I usually put this thing on one section of one of those military cleaning rod guides on a variable speed battery operated drill and just go in there very slowly in the chamber back and forth, and it'll clean all that fouling right out of the chamber.
Okay. The back of the chamber has those lugs, and those are extremely important to work on and keep clean because that's what the bolt locks into. And if you get a little chunk of grit in there or something else, it's going to really lock things up.
Yeah, if you had a piece of debris in there, that might even prevent the bolt from coming totally into battery and cause a malfunction.
I've had that happen with primers. I get a little chunk of primer blown out from some bad ammo,
Yeah.
and I couldn't figure out why the gun wouldn't even go into battery. I mean, it didn't even try to work.
An entire primer, or just the anvil of the primer, for example, as a round is being extracted, then that drops out. Your stage is over then sometimes.
Yeah, it's done. So you get the chamber cleaned up. Then personally, I take and wipe out the back end of the receiver and just keep it clean, you know.
Right. You could take a rag on some kind of a pistol brush mop or something and clean the rest of this out.
We'll do the cheap way and use the towel I'm probably not supposed to be using. Okay.
Yeah, of all the rifles we picked, this is the dirtiest one here, so.
And that's okay. That brings us to the point of how to clean this thing up. So now to put it back together, getting the air back together is pretty simplistic. The first thing you're going to do.
I'm going to put that.
Are you going to put any oil on this?
Yep, I always oil up my charging hand. Now this is kind of how you lube your gun depends on the environment that you're going to use it in. If you're in a reasonably good environment that doesn't have too much dust to it, I'd probably run the rifle pretty wet.
So if you're up in the tree line and stuff like that.
But for example, at Reno, that's a different story because within a few hours, all that oil is going to turn into lapping compound. So you'd probably want to run your rifle fairly dry.
It'll just grind everything up at that point.
This has a couple of dog ears on it, and those will fit in a corresponding slot in the upper, and now your charging handle's in there.
Okay, we've reassembled and lubed our bolt.
Right.
We'll add just a little bit of lube to this thing. Okay. And really, you only need to lube it up in front because when you put the bolt in, it's going to pick that lube up and drag it to the rear by itself. So then, take and drop the bolt in. Now the one little detail there, that bolt head has to be all the way forward or it's not going to slide in.
Right.
Okay, then just click them into place.
And the upper's ready to go.
The upper's ready to go. Well, what do we need to do on that lower?
Well, let's take a look at that lower.
Now, on the lower receiver, what are we going to have to do?
Well, typically the lower receivers will fill up with dirt and debris in where the fire control mechanism is, right in here.
In the hammer and trigger area.
Right. And after a certain point, that debris will start blocking the forward and rearward travel of the trigger and prevent the trigger from either breaking the sear and releasing the hammer or resetting. So it'll cause a trigger malfunction if you get too much dirt in there.
And it's probably more critical on the competition style guns than it is on, like a military style gun.
That's right. That's one thing you say for the military style triggers. They are specifically made to be more dirt tolerant. One of the compromises you're making when you go to a highly refined match grade trigger mechanism is that they're less dirt sensitive, and you've got to maintain them a little bit better.
Okay.
Now, what I would do is, if you've got a product like Birchwood Casey gun scrubber that comes in a can and it's pressurized, you can actually sluice this whole thing out and wash it out. Or if you've got a solvent tank with compressed air like we do, that works even better yet because then you can put a lot of air in there and really clean that whole thing out.
Or one of those $2,000 ultrasonic cleaners.
Or one of those, right?
Yeah.
Better yet.
And just throw the whole gun in.
A lot of police departments have those now, I think. Now, once I've cleaned that out, we need to relubricate it. And there's 2 points that, in particular, that need lubrication. What I would do is release the hammer, so the hammer is in the fired or the down position. And then I would take like a dental pick and use some good trigger or sear lube and put a dab of it on the hammer notch.
Okay, let's see if we can get that lined up there. There we go. So you would go into this area right here.
Yeah, if you look, you'll see the notch of the hammer. Mm-hmm. And if you want to put some lube on that, well, then it automatically transfers to the sear when you cock the hammer.
Oh, okay, so when you bring it back,
right,
it's rubbing it past it.
Right.
Okay.
The other area is right on what I call the disconnector interface area. This hook on the hammer is where the disconnector engages, and that should be lubricated, and that'll give you a nice smooth reset feel.
Okay, great. So there's not a lot of maintenance on the low end or the bottom end.
I would also put just a little drop of oil on the trigger and hammer pins, which will bleed into the hammer and trigger bushings.
Into the areas where they roll.
Right, right. And that'll reduce the friction in between the trigger and the hammer and the pins.
Okay. Now I actually take and add some grease to the buffer assembly inside the rear of the tube.
Yeah, you want to clean this and relube it every now and then. I don't think it needs to be cleaned and relubed every time that you clean the gun, because it is somewhat sealed in a sense. But if you press down on this plunger, well then you can release the buffer and the spring assembly, which comes out just as easily as that. You can clean that up if it needs cleaning and relubricate it, and then press the whole thing back into place and it locks in just like that.
Well, now that we've done the lower receivers, let's talk about cleaning magazines.
All right, here's one here, and you can show us what you do to maintain your magazines.
Apparently not enough after the malfunction I had at the Nationals this year.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was painful. Take care of your magazines. They're going to end up costing you in the long run. Mine cost me a national championship this year. So what you want to do is keep an eye on your springs, your followers, and keep the things clean. Now, one of the things you can do is grab yourself a mag brush, which is a pretty cool little deal. The only problem is, sometimes when you're using that mag brush, it's not the same length as the magazine, so you'll actually have to disassemble that magazine using the small hole down in the bottom here. Push that in, pull that plate down, and you'll be able to take that mag apart and work on it. Keep them clean, keep them working. We've got one other place to look at here on the magazines. Really close, keep an eye on the back area of the magazines right here for any type of damage onto the lips, the rear of the magazine, or in the front of the magazine. Keep a real close eye on all of those areas. Otherwise, they'll end up costing you a match. Okay? Now, John, let's go, that pretty much covers the cleaning and maintenance and care of an AR-15.
I think so.
And let's go wash up and then talk about tuning and tricking them out.
I'm ready for that.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about some of the classes that we have to shoot out there in the sport, like open class, which is the first one we'll start with. In open class, you can pretty much do anything. My open rifle that I shot for a part of this season has a whole bunch of modifications on it. You'll see it's got GP's forend on it, which is a real nice addition. You can put scopes and lights and anything you need to on the forend in any position you want. This is set up right now with a scope mount on the right side, which is where I normally run either the J-point sight or a Seymour. And on the left side, up here on the top, it's got a rail that I usually run a flashlight on if we have a low light type of stage.
And typically you'd want those at these diagonal positions as opposed to, 3, 6, 9, and 12.
All the normal tactical rails out there put your objects in a straight pattern, which that's great if you've got to run the sight systems where you need to look through them for secondaries.
Co-witness sight systems.
Right, but it really doesn't help you if you've got to run a secondary sight, because turning the gun 90 degrees is really hard to see that. Mm-hmm. Running two types of sighting systems is really beneficial. It allows you to engage targets up close with one and far away with the other and have two different 0 points.
Right.
My Seymour, when I've got it on the gun, or my J-point when I've got them on the gun, I sight them in for 35 to 40 yards. And I'll use that out to, from anywhere from about the 15-yard area to about the 50-yard area. When I use the TA-11, which is the scope of choice for me, I use a lid from Butler Creek, a 0.5 objective lid. It's a lens cover. And I use that out to 15 yards because since I'm right-eye dominant and right-handed, it actually changes the 0 point by almost 3 inches at 15 yards. Mm-hmm. And it is dead center 0 to 15 yards for headshots.
Right.
And so I use the scopes in 3 different ways. Out to 15 yards, I use this centered up in the position with the lens closed off. Then I'll go to the Seymour or the J-point, and then I'll finally go back to this for any distance targets.
Matt, you should probably explain too that occluded eye system. Probably a lot of people don't understand that, how that actually works.
The OEG was a gun sight that came out a long time ago. It was the occluded eye gun sight.
Right.
And your right eye sees the image inside of the scope, and your left eye sees the target, and your brain superimposes them. Now, the right eye sees it if you're right-handed and you're right eye dominant. If you're left eye and left-handed,
then you're in trouble.
No, then you're okay. It's when you actually run into the cross-dominant position where you really can't do it. So it's something that doesn't work for you. because it's hard to change that dominance without rewiring some stuff upstairs.
Yeah, I know Taryn uses that technique with the TA-11 too, or with the bend and aiming concept. This fiber optic on the outside is something that Trijicon calls the bend and aiming concept, which channels exterior light to light up the reticle even when it's blocked. See, so in broad daylight, even when you block this, then you would see the donut or the chevron, whatever you have, and it's just like using a dot sight at close range, point blank.
Right. One of the other things I do to modify the scope is the reticle in this thing is so incredibly bright that in daylight it'll actually obscure the targets.
Right, a little bit too much.
Right. And so I use some tape. I actually use it from the video world. It's called gaffing tape because it doesn't leave any residue behind, and block off the fiber optic at different sizes or different lengths here, just to darken that reticle up if I need to. So that's something to be sure to have handy, because you get out there for a precision headshot at 100 yards.
Right.
You leave it brightly lit on a bright day, you're not even going to see the head.
Yeah, it's overpowering.
It's like, whoa, there it is. So keep an eye on or keep available the idea that you can block that off. Now, we can run a bipod on this, and this bipod's got a modification on it. You'll notice almost all of the bipods from everybody else all have rubber feet on them. Well, it makes it kind of hard to drag them around. So these are from Bruce Pyatt, who's another world champion shooter and a world-class guy, great guy. And this allows you to drag the bipod around on any type of surface without getting it stuck on the ground, which we'll find out in the shooting section that's pretty important. Okay. The handguard allows you to locate your bipod in any position. Now, this can be beneficial. Sometimes I've ran in matches and had the bipod actually at 90 degrees for side prone, which, you know, beats putting a fist underneath it.
Oh, for sure.
You've got a real nice, solid, stable area to go with. One other piece on here is my tack latch is a little different than most everybody else's. This is a newer part out from PRI that is a heavy-duty part, and it's got a gas release right here that, if you have a blown-out case, allows that gas to deflect away from your face, and you can see how it's blocked off and blocks off the receiver area there. This also works really well if you've got anything going on like gloves or whatever, because it gives you a nice big latch to hook onto.
That looks like a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, you could beat the heck out of this thing. It's sturdy as heck. The trigger system in this gun is actually from Chip McCormick. It's it's kind of different. It's a drop-in trigger mechanism that is a one-piece unit, which you've also got a one-piece unit coming out.
Yeah, we got a modular trigger coming out too.
A modular trigger coming out. And this one's a little strange compared to almost all the AR triggers out there, because it's actually got a flat trigger on it. Nearly everything out there is curved.
Right.
You know, so this gives a completely different feel and a different leverage point, because you can get your finger lower down onto the trigger. This is what we were referring to when we were talking about the two-stage triggers. There is movement first and then the brake. So it's just another option. Find out what you need for, cock it, yeah, that'll help. What you need for your shooting, and try out everything out there. You'll be amazed. Now, John has a top end set up over here.
Yeah, this is another open setup, and this in the open class, like Matt said, anything goes. So we've got the large compensator, which is a little bit softer than these round stock comps on some of the other rifles here. So we've got the original recoil eliminator on there. I've got a bipod attached to it, and I kind of like to use my bipod in this fashion. So if I'm shooting in open class and I need to deploy it, if I'm going to go prone, I can pop it out in a hurry like that. If I'm coming back up to shoot around a barricade and I may want to get rid of it, I can just pull it right back in. Secondly, it's got a variable power scope, which I would typically use from 25, 30 yards on out, but from point blank out to 25 to 35 yards, I would use this dot sight, which is attached right to the top of the scope, piggyback. This whole system here with the piggyback scope has also become very popular with military users now on sniper rifles. They use this secondary scope first off to scan for possible targets, and then transition to the high magnification scope. So it's one of those things that has been developed in the sport of action shooting that has found its way into our military use.
Now, my preference is the TA-11, which is a 3.5 power scope. John actually has the TA-01.
TAO1. Those would be probably the two most popular scopes that Trijicon makes.
And they're pretty much the most popular scopes for 3-gun shooting there are.
Yeah, I would say that you see more of these things out there than probably anything else, and a number of reasons. I mean, the optics are really superb. They've got very high resolution glass. They're extremely durable and reliable. There's a reason why the military use them. And once you play with one of these, you get a real appreciation. In fact, if you ever have to, you know that you can exit a submarine at 100 feet with one of these?
That'll be handy.
That's right.
I'm sure I'll be doing that. Now, mounting these up is a little different on a receiver from JP versus all the other receivers out there. I use, on a standard type of receiver, a LaRue setup, which LaRueTactical.com makes a incredible set of removable rings and bases that are just, they are so tough, it's amazing, and they re-zero incredibly well.
Real good repeatability and very durable.
Absolutely. And all you do is you can throw these two levers, which I've got them locked down, because I try to tighten everything up if I can. You throw these two levers, take the scope off. You could actually have a couple of scopes set up at a match and change between them and not have to concern yourself with worrying about your zero.
Right. If the rules allow you to change optics, you know, in some cases they do.
Some cases they do.
Right.
Sometimes the advantageous thing is to get to the match and look at the format of the match and then go, ooh, I need a scope like that.
That'd be the more typical thing, right? If it turns out that the whole match is under 100 yards, well, you know where we're going with that.
I'm going to go to a dot sight.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not even going to use anything with magnification on it. So that gives you some options there.
Yeah, the ability to have more than one sight pre-zeroed to the lower or to your upper and interchange them is one of the beautiful features on these rifles.
Oh, absolutely. Or the fact that you could, if you've got enough money, just have a couple extra uppers in your bag, grab whatever upper you want to shoot in that match.
Yeah, if you want to have them set up and permanently, some people don't like to interchange things, and if you can afford it, fine, then have 2-3 uppers. But you really don't have to do that. You can actually have several scopes, even another iron sight. Like these iron sights are repeatable enough so that once they're zeroed, you can take them off and put them back on and have a set of irons in a bag that you could slap on there if you ever needed them.
Right. Now, this here is more of a tactical type of setup, along with this rifle for the tactical scope class, also, which is coming into popularity in the limited stuff because a lot of people can't see the targets at 300 yards to shoot them with iron sights.
That's right.
So they allow you to run one scope on the gun. You're allowed to run a backup set of iron sights on the gun in the event, and that allows you to do the close range engagements with that. This scope is set up on a Arredondo mount, and you'll notice that there's a offset angle right here. Now you can take this Trijicon and set it here or here, and you could put a Seymour here or J-point, whatever, swap them back and forth.
And I've seen it both ways.
And so, you know, you don't have any happy thing. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. If you've got a match where most of your stuff is under 100 yards, but there's 3 or 4 long targets, well, keep the dot sight in the center with a cool handguard that you can put anything anywhere you want it, mount your Trijicon off to the side, and mount your bipod actually at an angle.
Right.
And then for all the normal targets, you're up on the target with the regular dot sight, and only when you have to shoot far away, when the bipod's out, you just climb into the gun and it'll be at the angle automatically.
It's worthwhile noting that your long range sight really has to be registered to the receiver, not the handguard.
Right, absolutely, because the handguards have a tendency to flex a little bit.
Right.
You can actually flex the barrel and the handguard just a little bit by putting a little bit of pressure into them. And running it in the rear of it, it's a little better because it's a little stiffer back here. Running a secondary sight way up front, if it's any type of scope thing, that you're going to use past about, what, 30 yards?
You know, even with this all the way out here, I've had good luck all the way out to 50 yards with it, but normally I would not go that. I'd limit myself to about 35, 40 yards with that setup.
Right. And then, like this one has a flashlight on the front rail that I usually talk about. This is the Tactical Illuminator, the M3, and it's by Insight Technology, and we'll see that it's nice and bright and really helps out if you've got any type of low light event, because you can take and pop it on and off the gun.
Right.
Which makes a big difference.
And I'll tell you, after the the Mystery Mountain 3 gun this year, I'm always going to keep a light with me now.
Yeah, that.
There was a lot of borrowing of flashlights at that match.
There was a whole lot of borrowing of flashlights at that match. The stock systems on the guns, find one that's about the right length for you. A good place to start out with that is to take and grab the grip up. And I like to have the gun just a little short of my elbow break right here. A little shorter is okay. If it's too long in this area right here and is pressing against this, you're going to catch on your body when you go to mount the gun.
Right, that's a good rule of thumb.
You know, it just works out pretty well. This is one of the adjustable stocks. This is an Ace, isn't it?
That's an Ace SOCOM that has like a 4 or 5 position adjustable butt plate on it.
And so if you are one of the guys that needs to run body armor,
right,
or you have any other type of gear, you can put it in the right position so that your eye relief is still the same behind the scope.
Not to mention a lot of the ladies really like a short stock setup, and this is a great thing for them.
Yeah, good option for them. On that tactical irons gun, or tactical scoped gun, I noticed you cut the grip off.
Yeah, that's kind of an idiosyncrasy of mine. I found that that's all of the grip I actually used, and also that enabled me to have a little bit more versatility in the gun in case I had to elevate the muzzle and bring this back end down. So it gave me a little bit more versatility in terms of being able to raise and lower the back end. And if I had to shoot monopod off a 20-round magazine, I could actually do it.
Great, great.
This is the rifle that I use in the tactical optics class, and there again, when I want to use this secondary sight, I don't have to change my cheek weld. I just rotate right into it, and it's just like shooting a set of pistol sights, like that.
You can see how bright that little front sight he's got in there
from
is.
Point blank out to say 35, 40 yards. This is just as fast as shooting your pistol, whereas you find that a 4-power scope is just a little bit too slow to use at that distance.
Okay.
And speaking of the scope, Matt prefers like the TA-11, and that's a little bit more flexible in the eye relief. And my favorite scope is the TA-01 series, which has a wider field of view, but the compromise is that the eye relief is a little bit fussy. I've even gone so far as to, we've got our own reticle that I've designed for this, which exactly matches the trajectory of the type of rifles and the type of ammunition that we use.
Now this has a modification that's actually in use by Special Forces also.
That's right. You notice it's got a piggyback J-point, this little electronic sight on there. And this is another concept having evolved out of our sport. Rather than use a really short radius iron sight like on the NSN, they've gone to using this J-point, which attaches directly to the back of the sight. So they've got their long-range capability of the ACOG, but yet for this, like these urban warfare scenarios that they're going to find at the CQB, well then they're going to just raise their head and 2 eyes open and transition to the dot sight.
That's great. Okay. These are the aluminum fins that you were talking about, right?
That's the part, right. You can see just how much surface area it has. It has a tremendous heat capacity once it's attached to the barrel.
Well, that'll really cool down the rifles in matches like the MGM Ironman.
That's a perfect application for it.
We have some stages up there that are, my favorite one was 78 rounds of rifle, I think it was 40 rounds of shotgun and 30 rounds of handgun. So you're going to heat everything up quite a bit.
Yeah, and this year at the ITRC they had a stage with about 500 rounds of rifle inside of about 45 minutes.
That's time to buy a new barrel.
That was a real barrel burner.
There's a bunch of cool products like that out on the marketplace. The cooling fins, the modifications and everything. You know, make sure you find what's going to work for you and your shooting, and you use the most optimal stuff you can afford to make your job easier out there. Now, this gun here is set up for the tactical irons or limited class, but it's actually in 308.
Right, which could actually put you into that new He-Man class.
Yeah, He-Man class is 308, 45, and 12 gauge.
Yeah, 45 single stack and 12 gauge.
Yeah, 12 gauge pump, I think.
Pump, right.
Yeah, let's make it really easy on people, which is sure fun on a 100-round stage trying to figure out how to make everything work. Tell us about your 308 here.
Well, this is one of the new Bushmaster rifles, and all our parts are compatible on this, and this was a conversion we did just for that class with the Shorty A2 sight, which is put out by DPMS. It's kind of like an A2 match sight without the handle. That gives you the advantage of being able to move it up and down the rail here to get the right relationship between the rear sight and the front sight. The front sight is actually a target globe. because we're not required to use a military type sight. We can actually use a globe sight, and this comes with 16 different inserts, and you've got to be able to find something in there that works for you, whether it might be a post or a crosshair or an aperture. There's a lot of different selection, and this type of sight actually gives you a much better accuracy potential than typical military sights. In fact, guys that have come from the small bore area like myself, you realize that you can shoot really optical level accuracy with a globe type front sight.
Oh yeah, you can shoot extremely accurate with them. On these rifles, you've got this is the Benny Cooley comp, right?
Right, we designed that for Benny, and this fits in the 1x3" rule criteria for tactical class, and it can actually be used in any class, of course, whereas the original recoil eliminator here, because it's larger than 1 inch in diameter, can only be used in open class.
Now this, the comp I've got on this DPMS rifle is actually a Benny Hill comp, which you know, it works really well. It doesn't have a lot of kick to it. I don't think it fits in that 1x3" rule. It's
Looks
more
a little longer.
A little more of an open class comp, but there's a lot of options out there. So try all of them and see which one's going to work for you. I hope that gives you a good overview of some of the different things you can do to the guns and some of the ways to work with them. They're so adaptable to everything. When you're going to a match, find out what they're going to make you do, find out what their rules are, because the rules are going to be different than everybody else's probably. We've got that issue going on. And figure out how to set yourself up with the optimum equipment to win that competition. John,
hey,
thank you for coming out and being a part of this.
Thanks for having me, it was great.
And we appreciate it. It looks great. You've got some incredible looking guns, and I can't wait to get to shooting them out on the range.
Well, that should be coming up shortly.
Yep. We're here with Mark Buchanan from 3gungear.com. Mark, what is the most important thing you see about the shooters out there? What's the most important information you can pass on to them?
Shooters getting into it is familiarization with their equipment, their basic operational knowledge of the system itself, how it works.
Okay, like as in just the way the gun works?
Well, we've all been shooting pistols for years, so now we're transitioning to long guns.
Okay.
Where's the safety? Where's the mag release? Sounds simple, but we're so used to the ergonomics on the pistol, the magazine release on a rifle is on the opposite side as an example.
Right, right. Well, you've got to hit it with your index finger if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, you need to buy a different one.
Correct.
You know, working the bolt, working all these different things changes it up. Just gear location changes for almost every match.
Well, that's the thing that you want to try and avoid the most. Don't keep changing your equipment. Don't keep changing your gear locations. New shooters typically keep on putting things different places, and you see them on a stage. They'll go for magazines in their pocket when they're not there. They'll go for shotgun shells where they were a week ago.
Right.
So find something that works with you. Make sure it's rugged. Make sure it's reliable.
When I'm shooting matches like the MGM, now I have to almost refit myself for every stage because there's so many different chunks of equipment you need to use for that match. Once a shooter gets to a certain level, they'll be able to refit themselves usually.
I think shooting open, that's a specific idiosyncrasy where you're so more particular about the gear. Shooting limited or tackle the way I do, I shoot the same gear whether I'm shooting the MGM. I might add an extra magazine, an extra set of shotgun shells.
Okay.
But other than that, everything's in the same place.
Okay. So keep the gear consistent, learn how it works, learn how your guns work, and then we got to get back to the one thing. What would be our basic gun needs with the rifle?
Make sure your gun fits you.
Okay.
And specifically with the rifle, know your zero.
Know your zero.
Know your zero.
You've got to have your zero cold when you go to a match, because if you don't have that nailed down, I don't know how many people go to the match, they don't know where their gun's shooting.
I hear that time and time again, stage after stage, match after match.
So if there's one thing you're going to do before a match?
Zero your rifle.
Zero the rifle. Okay. What's the important characteristics of the rifle?
Again, it depends on the individual. Your needs are a little bit different than mine.
Right. My demands almost on some of it.
Correct. Well, also just your physical makeup, your eyesight versus my eyesight. Shooting a rifle, we've seen a lot of times where you start a stage, the targets are white. 3 shooters in, targets are gray. Color separation is a big issue that people don't think about. So whether you're using magnified optics or iron sights, find what works for you as an individual above anything else.
With your eyesight.
With your eyesight.
Right. Now, I would also want to make sure that my rifle works.
To me, that's a given. You're going to spend, going to a 3-gun match, a lot more time and money than going to your local pistol match.
Okay.
So the care and preparation is 3 times more. Take the time, make sure your systems are clean, make sure they're working. You change out springs on your pistol, you don't even think about it. Why wouldn't you change out springs on your rifle?
Yeah, or your shotgun or whatever.
Or even the shotgun.
I mean, it absolutely amazes me when I go to these matches and see so many people's guns not working. And I had that problem for years, especially on the shotgun end of things, where the shotgun would go down like at the Superstition Mystery Mountain. I basically lost that match 4 years in a row because of the shotgun.
Something simple, probably.
Yeah, I went to a Benelli. That's an easy fix, isn't it?
Well,
that works for me.
Sure.
Now, some people that might not work for, and they might like the 1100 platform better. But they have to do the maintenance on them, because a lot of people just go out and shoot them, put them in the box, don't even think about them until the next 3-gun match.
Right. I mean, we all had these extra guns in our safes for years, but they've been collecting dust up until recent times where 3 guns become more popular.
Right. So care and maintenance, we've covered that with John Paul. So make sure you take care of those guns and have them working. If you're going to go to a match, know your zero. Know your ballistic data.
Well, that's, such a controversy. People have a tendency to overshoot the rounds. We've talked extensively over the years about the effects of 55-grain bullets, 69-grain bullets, 77-grain bullets.
Right.
You're making up the difference with weight or velocity. Sometimes you need to use specific ammo for a specific match. How many times have you gone up against like a LaRue target at 300 yards with 55-grain bullets?
I don't. I shoot the 77s normally on anything when it's single shot targets, like, plates. I'll go to a 77-grain bullet because I know it's going to knock the snot out of it. Generally past 150 yards is where that big power difference comes in between those rounds.
Correct.
And you got 30 to 45% more energy from a 77 than a 55-grain bullet.
Right, and of course the 55s at close range between CQB quarters to 100 yards.
It doesn't make a bit of difference.
Yeah, the recoil impulse on the guns is significantly less.
Really less. I mean, there's so much less movement, but if you're only firing one shot at a time, the recoil impulse doesn't matter.
Correct, because of the time you need to align each shot.
Right. We had a problem in the last year with some factory ammo, and some shooters went to the USPSA matches, and they couldn't even make minor.
Another huge, another area of, conversation. Barrel length versus bullet weight and velocity. I don't know offhand what the USPSA requirement is, but there was one company manufacturing 55-grain bullet that's shooting out of a 16-inch gun will not make minor.
Right.
So you have to run with a 20-inch gun to have enough velocity.
With that ammo.
With that specific ammo.
Now, a lot of people didn't know that and went sub-minor, which is zeroed for the match.
Correct.
If you're going to a match, especially a major match where you're going to spend $500 to $1,000 shooting it, get a chronograph your ammo so you actually know how fast the stuff is going and know your data, and then you'll know whether or not you're going to get in trouble. If you're reloading it or buying factory ammo, make sure it makes at least minor in your gun. Okay? Now, do you chamber check all your ammo?
Oh, religiously. Again, with the 223 rounds, there's your mil spec requirements. Running the high performance guns like the JP guns, they've got tight tolerance chambers. Chamber check everything. Get a chamber checker that's cut with the same reamer or close to what your gun was chambered with.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You can get the standard go no go gauges. The chamber checkers from Dillon. They've got that drop gauge.
Yeah, those work a lot. I found that I have to learn how the ammo needs to fit in that chamber gauge with my rifle.
Right, because every chamber's cut differently.
Correct.
The absolute best thing is get a chamber checker cut off of the exact same reamer immediately after your barrel was cut.
That would be ideal.
Yeah, that'd be the ideal setup. That's the way John actually set up my guns a long time ago. Was he actually, it'd come off the assembly line or whatever, and he'd cut the chamber, then he'd cut the chamber checker right on the spot.
Sure.
And then if it's not dropping into there, it's not going into your chamber. Now, one of the other issues we've had, actually we had a guy run into it over at the Rocky Mountain 3-gun. The ROs were rocking around with magnets for their rifle ammo.
Yeah, it's not all ammo is created equal. Obviously, military ammo is made as inexpensively as possible, so they use a lot of steel. This is an example where just a magnet from your local hardware store, And
Now, why won't they let you shoot that in a match?
it's destructive on the steel targets. That's the
It-
that's the reason.
It destroys the steel compared to a standard. like this.
It dimples the steel over hundreds of rounds,
Or might punch right through it.
or potentially punch through it. But when you start and dimple the surface, it causes more erratic ricochets.
So you get a high velocity exit from the bullet off the range instead of a splatter and dumping the energy.
That's
from the
my
round.
understanding.
Yeah, it's primarily a safety issue. So make sure if you buy any surplus or military ammo or anything else, double check it with a magnet before you go use it in a match or before you go practice with it on steel targets. If you're just shooting paper and it's cheap, it might be a great thing to practice with. But if you're going to shoot at any steel at all, make sure you don't have any steel core ammo.
That's correct.
Okay. Now the ammo that I use, I really task drive the ammo as to what I'm doing. Now, like for most of the 3-gun matches, I'll shoot from 0 to 150 yards. I generally use the actual 60 grain ballistic tips from Black Hills.
Okay.
And then beyond that, it's normally not 2 shots a target over 150 yards. It's normally steel plates out there because they take too long to reset.
Correct.
And then I'll go to the 77s because of the energy transfer.
Correct.
Now, if you task drive your ammo, I mean, it's really critical. Find out what the competition is you're going to.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, if you're shooting at a match, let's say back east, where they don't have a lot of long distance, probably max 150 yards. 55 grain bullet is, the only thing you'll need. If you're going to shoot longer ranges, I mean, out here at Rio, we'll go out to 350 on a regular basis out at our matches. SOF I've seen out to 500 yards.
Yeah, you need a bullet to buck the wind and carry a little bit better out there.
69, 77s are definitely the way to go on those kind of distances.
Right. Right now we've got a little bit of wind going on out here.
Yeah.
We got little lightweight bullets. When does wind become a problem? Because I'm sure a lot of people wonder about that.
Well, that's an interesting conversation that we've had before. What's the real effect? The lighter weight bullets are going faster. So even at a 10-mile-an-hour wind, at 300 yards, you've got about a 10-inch.
About a 10-inch deflection.
About 10-inch deflection. Okay. You go with the 77 grain bullets that are running about 2750. You got about a 10-inch deflection.
So it really doesn't make a difference which one, as long as you know which way the wind direction's coming.
And your velocity. If you're shooting a 55 grain bullet out of a 16-inch gun,
right,
you're not going to be getting those higher velocities.
Right. Now, do you have a Kestrel 4000 with you?
Yeah, I do. That's something we found that's...
we actually found this because of shooting the sniper competitions, the long-range stuff. You really need to have more data than you do for most 3-gun matches. But this has made a big difference in the way we approach shooting.
Well, the thing I think it's given me more than anything is more of an understanding of my environment. Before I'd go somewhere and like right now there's a wind blowing. Well, at one time I'd say, okay, it's windy. What does that mean?
Well, set this up for the wind there, and let's see if we can get a look at that. And we'll just see what the wind is blowing at us right now. Okay.
It just dropped.
There it goes.
7.
There it hit. 5, 6 miles an hour, 7 miles an hour. And that's coming in at a little bit of a quartering angle.
From where we would be if we were shooting downrange to my right.
Yeah. So when we're going to go shoot at 300 yards, if we just favored the left edge of the plate,
literally just the left edge, you wouldn't have to hold off. I think people
even at 10-mile-an-hour wind, you only favor 10 inches to the left of center.
Correct. I think people hold over more based on their lack of knowledge of their environment.
Right. I think they almost everybody, if there's wind, they overhold.
Correct.
You
Time
know?
and time again.
Yeah. And unless they're sitting in a spot where they're enclosed and they don't see the wind effect downrange because they're not paying attention.
Yeah, they're not looking at the surrounding foliage, trees, grass, whatever's out there. What you see where you're at is not what's going to affect your bullet downrange.
Right. The most important thing to remember about wind is what happens within that first 100 yards is where most of the deflection happens.
Correct.
So if you've got wind coming across at 50 yards and it's coming across really heavy, do some hold off for it. But even if it's just a 10-mile-an-hour wind, just favor the side of the plate. And you launch around, if it hits to the right, give it a little bit more. But most people hold off 2 or 3 plates and they just sit there and miss and they can't see where anything's going.
Well, that's another interesting perspective, is the fact that people don't think about their target size relative to the distance they're shooting. They're given a measuring instrument at the distance they're shooting. If you got a 10-inch plate and there's a 10-inch wind or a 10-mile-an-hour wind, hold off the perceived
Pull
size
off
of the
half
plate.
a plate.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the information's given to them, they're just not thinking about what they've got.
Right, and if there's anything that continues through our conversations and the training we'll do with Kevin, it's to start thinking about what you're doing out there, planning it, practicing it, and actually getting out and doing it before you go to the match. Otherwise,
Correct.
you're going to be standing at the match going, what do I do now?
Again, getting back to understanding your equipment and its relative performance with what you're going to do.
Absolutely. I think one of the things, Mark, that people really get trapped in is going after this infinitesimally small group size. You know, what's actually necessary from a 3-gun rifle? I mean, our targets are actually really big.
They are.
At 300 yards, a 10-inch target's a 3 MOA target.
Correct.
You know,
And-
so that'd be only a 3-inch group required at 100 yards.
Correct.
Roughly.
Yeah.
But now,
roughly.
if you have a 1-inch gun, which is almost any AR-15 is capable of,
Correct.
it's going to be more than necessary for almost anything we shoot, isn't it?
Yeah, people get tied up with trying to shoot, the 3-shot group that covers a dime at 100 yards. Think of the average A zone. It's about almost a 3x5 card. Okay, if your gun is capable and the ammo selection you choose, you can produce a 1-inch group at 100 yards
Repeatedly. Right.
You're good to go. Accuracy relative to target size, as you just said. A LaRue target at 200 yards. Well,
They're this big.
that's half of an upper body
Yeah, upper body IPSC target.
upper body IPSC target.
Yeah.
The guns are more than capable of the accuracy. The better accuracy means that you have more of an error factor that you can work with.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true.
So you can be off a little bit more on the barricade, a little off on your head position on your gun, a little bit off on your speed on the trigger.
Right, you can mash the trigger a little bit more and it'll open up, but it doesn't matter downrange because of our target size.
Correct.
Right. But I think people just spend so much time chasing that when they should seriously work on all of the other areas.
Correct.
I mean, secondary gun transitions, shooting on the move with a rifle, reloading the darn thing.
Above everything, and we joke about it all the time, 100-yard zero, know your zero.
Yeah, get your zero, shoot a group, get solid on it, then stop stressing about it, get into the actual practice of everything else, and before you go to a match, recheck everything.
The week before, just make sure nothing's moved. If you have the ability when you're at the match to, you've come from out of state, check your gun, go up to the local range, shoot 5 rounds. You now have the confidence that your gun's in the same impact point it was when you left.
Absolutely. Now, one of the other things I saw with the Rocky Mountain 3-gun was we had some angles to the first targets out there on that stage 1. There were some serious angles going on. Now,
Correct.
People perceived them as serious angles. They were actually only about 15 degrees when I measured them, which made them negligible.
Right, and again, people, they read all these ballistics magazine articles, shoot high, shoot low. Shooting at an extreme angle, shoot at the bottom of the target, whether
Right,
you're
but
shooting uphill or downhill.
An extreme angle is 60 degrees.
Correct.
Okay, that's like this.
Right.
We'll never see that. Basically.
Well, back to our bullet drop. If you've got a 180-yard zero, you're
right.
shooting at a 100-yard target, you're about a half an inch high.
Right.
You go to 200 yards,
You're like, I think, an inch low. half
okay,
inch
and at
low.
300 yards,
7.4 roughly with a 55 grain bullet.
and you've got a 10-inch plate at 300 yards, where are you going to aim?
Well, if I'm aiming straight on, just above the top edge of it,
Correct.
right at the top edge area. If I'm at a 60-degree angle, the round's actually going to hit high.
Correct.
But the odds on seeing that are extremely low. Most of the stuff we see in the matches is within 10 to 15 degrees, and the angle doesn't matter. We never see it within 300 yards having a dramatic or drastic effect, and yet everybody at that competition was sitting there going, I was missing those targets because of this.
Again, misperception of the operation of their equipment.
Right.
The nice thing about our guns these days is you do a follow-through on your long-range shooting, you're going to watch the bullet impact.
Right. Well, you're going to hopefully see it with the background if you don't hit the target.
Yeah.
Now, do you have one of the angle indicators?
I've got one of the
You got one of the
Mil-Dot Masters,
the
yeah.
Mil-Dot Master cards. Now, with these, you can actually measure the angle to the target. You attach a string and a weight and measure the angle of the target, and you've got it all set up. right?
Correct.
And that'll actually, you can punch that in to your ballistic software or you know, angle it off of here and figure it out.
Sure, but again, working with the 223s,
It's really not going to make a difference. out
average
here.
average maximum distance is 300 yards.
Yeah. Now, when I shot the sniper rifles and it was a 70-degree angle and it was 900 yards out,
Well, that's a completely different ballgame.
you know, then you're sitting there doing a bunch of math trying to figure that out.
Right.
For this, don't
Keep-
worry about it so
Keep
much.
it simple.
That's right.
Don't overthink your equipment.
Yeah, don't overthink your equipment. Have the options available to understand what's necessary.
Correct. As you said earlier, use a ballistic program, print it out, actually look at the numbers relative to your gun.
And relative to the target size.
And again, compare that to target size.
Right.
You start and think, well, it's only an inch. That's all it is. It's only an inch. The upper AB zone on an IPSC target is a 6-inch square.
Right.
That's an offhand target at 100 yards.
Yeah. Well, people should at least bring their basic shooting skill to the ability of being able to shoot a 6-inch group at 100 yards offhand. in the
I
first
think
place.
that the average shooter doesn't realize how well he can shoot at 100.
Really?
Yeah. I've met several new shooters that say, well, I can't shoot that offhand at 100.
Well, try it.
Try it. They
Yeah.
never try it.
Yeah.
And 6-inch target at 100 yards, people go, wow, that's pretty easy.
Well, we were doing the 12-inch target at 300 yards with the handgun the other day, so
And again, same thing. A 12-inch plate at 200 yards is a good offhand target. A 12-inch plate at 300 yards is a good offhand target.
it's going to get iffy at that point.
But you're learning your trigger control,
Right.
and you're
it's
learning
a
your
good
sight,
practice
your
target.
sight picture.
Absolutely. And it's one of the biggest things for shooting. It's a confidence builder for getting out there on the range. Because when you go to a match, you're not going to walk out there, see a 12-inch target, and go, oh boy.
But if it was a 12-inch target at 25 yards with the pistol, what would you do, Matt?
Me, I'd throw rocks at it. It's huge.
Okay, it's relative to the guns that you're shooting.
Right. Well, if you got a 12-inch, think of most of the people at a 3-gun match. Put a 12-inch target at 300 yards and say you've got to shoot this offhand. What are they going to do? They're going to freak out.
They'll panic.
They'll panic. And you know why? Because they never practiced it. They never tested themselves on that to learn what they needed to do.
What people need to do in their practices is push themselves a little bit.
Well, make your practice harder than you'll ever see in a match. And when you go to any match, you walk up and go, this is easy. I can handle this.
Correct.
Let's get into some of the gear and equipment here.
Well, it's been interesting over the last couple of years as far as the advancement of 3-gun and the interest.
Now, how did you get into this?
Same way I got into making range bags a bunch of years ago. Nothing existed.
And what did you do before this?
Background is automation and robotics.
Automation robotics, and now you're...
Manufacturing, designing custom tactical gear.
That's a little bit of a shift there.
Yeah, a little bit.
So did you start competing and then start building stuff, or did somebody run into you and
I
ask you to do
started
something?
shooting 3-gun and went out there and I said, okay, I've got an AR. Where do I put magazines?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of military stuff, you know, military surplus, a lot of hardcore tactical gear. We need something in between. We need something that's flexible, rugged, and comfortable.
Okay.
You've been out at the MGM. That's a marathon match.
Yeah, you've got to have everything for it, from your side pouches to your leg pouches to dump pouches to everything.
Correct. What I've tried to do in the designs is make things modular,
Okay.
where it doesn't matter what your base gear is. Any of my gear that we manufacture, you can use one piece or the complete set.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break here and come back and look at the rifle and the gear you've got for that, okay?
Okay.
Okay, let's take a look at what you got set up for the AR-15.
Quick and simple, 3-point sling. Any sling will do when shooting 3-gun competitions. Single point, the Viking Tactics sling is an excellent choice. Just something simple that you can do secondary gun
And most people
transitions.
don't even know how to put these slings on
Yeah,
their body.
It is really simple.
Follow the instructions. And
Follow
get it
the
on.
instructions. Give me a call. You know, it's a
What's
5-minute conversation.
Well, that's one of the things that people don't realize. Mark's actually a 3-gun resource. Call him up if you're lost on something with your guns and equipment, because he'll get you set up right. I mean, he's helped me out immensely. I don't know how many times, actually, you've probably lent me slings and stuff because I was forgetting something.
That's
but-
usually where I lose them. So a good sling will keep it in your bag. Most 3-gun matches, you'll probably not use one.
Yeah, you really want to stay away from them if you can.
A problem that people run into is you can get hung up on them. Get
Yeah.
hung up on barricades, hung up on props.
You can you tie yourself to the rifle then too, and if you've got a multi-gun match, getting into
Over,
it-
around your head, yeah, real
Big-
complicated.
Yeah.
Again, multi-gun type setup. So what you see here is typically what I will wear at my average match, whether it's IPSC or a Monster 3-gun. Got my
Or even a tactical match.
or even a tactical match. I've got good solid holster.
Okay, that's a Safariland 560.
Safariland 560, and then on my offside, just a 3-mag pouch.
Now this is, when we had the SOF, the Soldier of Fortune match, they had made you cover more, or most of the tactical matches still follow those rules.
For the most part.
They make you cover more than half of the magazine at the pouches.
It's about 2/3 is what they're looking for.
So that's legal at all the tactical competitions. You never have to worry about it falling out on you.
Well, that's another thing you see at the matches. People have a yard sale. They'll go charging up to a barricade, stop, magazines, stuff go flying everywhere.
Right.
My gear, it's solid, it's secure, it's flexible.
Okay.
So where I've got set up so far is...
Now you've got a modular setup on this.
Yeah, and this is what I use no matter what match I'm shooting. As you see here, I've got a belt attachment. Takes just a moment. Clip it in. It's not adjusted to my thigh, but that's okay.
You won't feel your toes here in a second.
Well, that's one of those things. It's secure for climbing like the ladder at the MGM match.
Right.
We are running, crawling, whatever you're going to do. Again,
You're not going to lose them, and they're not going to fill up with dirt in that kind of pouch either, which is going to cause a malfunction issue.
Right. The other problem that people run into is the physical space that you have on your waist. You know, nice big round guy is one thing, but I mean, I'm not big, but I'm not small. You start putting 3 mags here, you'll end up with rifle magazines in the middle of your back.
We got rifle mags back there, you got pistol mags here, you need, if you're running open class, you need the shotgun speed loader somewhere, and you just run out of stuff, or
Correct.
place to put them. So that drops them down out of the way.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's always in the same place. It's clear of my pistol pouches, but yet it's in a similar position,
For your reloads,
which would be a friendly reload.
nice consistent reload.
Very consistent.
We'll see how Kevin does on those tomorrow.
That'll be fun to watch. The other nice thing is, of course, you're wearing the gear for a period of time.
Yeah, if you're shooting all day in the gear, you want stuff
Easy on, easy off.
it's easy to move around and
60
take off, that's
rounds,
for sure.
on and off. Another useful item that kind of come to be as a dump pouch, I call it my shooter's third hand. We use them up at MGM for everything. Same thing, modular.
Clip it in,
Clip
hook
it
it
in.
around.
Now-
Hey, you can fill that up with shotgun.
You can fill this up with magazines, pistol magazines, rifle magazines.
If they're one of the matches that requires the tactical type reload, or you need to retain any extra mags or anything, that'd be a great place to put them.
Correct, or even the MGM.
Yeah.
You've got an empty magazine. Well, I don't want to throw it on the dirt. Put it in the mag pouch.
Right. With that match, people can actually help you out. So you'll be shooting. The guy behind you will grab your magazines out, load them up, and be sticking them back in your pouches probably while you're shooting.
That's been done before. People literally run out of rounds.
Yeah, they run out of ammo. For
Again,
the stages.
flexible.
Right.
Go on the left side, right side.
Now notice you've got yourself a brass catcher over here.
Yeah, that's turned out to be a very popular item.
Now this is actually in use by the military.
There's been many law enforcement military groups that have ordered that item. A little bit different. Advantage of it is if you're just going to do shoot and move drills,
Uh-huh. Oh, you don't have brass all over the place.
you don't have brass all over the place. So it's
So it's easy on,
easy on, easy off.
and then you can go dump it out in your bag by zipping it open.
Well, the other thing that you don't realize until you've used any kind of brass collecting device is the gas is being ejected out of the chamber. The mesh bag allows the gases to vent away from your face.
Oh, that's why it's mesh. Okay. I've never actually used one.
Yeah, it holds about 30 rounds.
So it wouldn't work at the MGM. We'd need a much bigger bag.
Correct. But again, something that's an option.
Well, definitely for a training item, that'd be really helpful too.
If you're going to reload, keep your brass clean. It's a great item to have.
You know, if you were in a vehicle, you know, they have you shooting out of a vehicle with an AR. Tell you what, like some of the tactical matches, that could be a real big advantage to not have that brass bouncing around inside there and dropping down your shirt and stuff like that.
Yeah, some of the law enforcement agencies use this type of device in their helicopters.
Yeah, well, they could use them in their vehicles, they can use them in helicopters, any type of enclosed space.
Correct, where you don't want a lot of debris. It's a trip hazard on a hard floor.
Right.
Again, same type of thing. You've got, you know, your favorite 6-tube speed loader pouch, which sometimes just isn't enough.
Yeah, I've actually modified it so that I can get a like 8 or 10 into yours. I know you weren't happy about that.
Well, you know, we just make them bigger for you. You can also run like the pistol caliber carbine magazines.
Oh yeah, for the
Uzi
subgun
mags,
stuff. Yeah.
subgun stuff, same type of setup. One attachment,
Lock it around.
lock
Yep.
it around.
Yep. Now, what do you have in the front right here?
Well, that's actually a M3 light pouch.
Oh, okay.
Every now and
So
then.
you stick the flashlight in there.
Well, actually,
Or,
the little
oh,
M3s.
the little M ones that go on the fore end.
Yeah, that clip on the front. Just something that we've got set up.
Okay. Well, the sun's dropping on us. We could probably use one pretty soon here.
Real soon. Just last couple things here, Matt. The biggest problem with, we'll call it the 308 mags, is their weight and size.
They're huge.
They're huge.
Now, putting those on your waist can really throw you around.
That's the advantage of the T-Rig. It helps distribute the weight. Now,
Okay.
there's just some monster mags.
Those are 308 mags. aren't
Those
they?
are 30-round 308 mags. Load those up and carry them around.
Yeah, that's probably about, what, 3 pounds loaded?
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty
that's-
close.
That's a whole lot of weight to be chucking around.
And then, of course, now we've got our, you know, a little bit hardcore tactical setup where you've got snaps, drain holes,
right.
but again, completely compatible
With
use
any
it
belt system.
with any belt system or
the T-rig,
or the
whatever.
drop rigs.
Yeah. One of the things from a tactical perspective, I suggest always running snaps. They can be a lot quieter to open up than any Velcro.
Correct.
You see a lot of the vests and stuff, they have this Velcro all over the place, and if you're sneaking up on anybody or doing anything else and you go rip the Velcro open, everybody else knows you're there. But you can take and hold the snap and go,
Just pop it open.
yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, we've kind of tried to come up with gear that works. Of course, this is shotgun gear's probably another one of your videos.
Well, we're going to be doing shotgun next, so we're going to probably invite you back for that.
That'd be great. I'd look forward to
You
seeing
want
that.
to come back and do the shotgun video with us?
Yeah, that'd be a whole lot of fun.
That's going to be volume 7 we're coming out with here fairly soon, and there's so much equipment for that, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, there's even more basic knowledge
Oh, absolutely.
because unfortunately, you can't miss with a shotgun, right?
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, I can. Done that a lot.
A lot.
But thank you, Mark, for coming out. We really
Appreciate being invited, Matt.
Absolutely. You got some great gear, and I know I've beat the heck out of it, and I appreciate you helping out.
Thank you. You recording?
Yep. And record.
And speed action.
So, John, what was the progression of parts that you came up with and started building for the market?
I like to think of it that we think of it in a fashion. Let's do that again.
You sure?
It feels good.
Okay, we're rolling. Stand by. And action.
We're here with John Paul from JP Enterprises. JP makes some of the most fantastic rifles for the competition and tactical world, as well as the home defense and every other type of one, and we're going to really need to shoot that again, aren't we? Because I didn't know where to go with it at that point. So.
But it was sounding good.
Yeah, it was sounding good. It rolled out really nice. We're here with John Paul from JP Enterprises. JP makes some of the finest rifles for tactical, competition, 3-gun work, all sorts of stuff, and I'm using that stuff word again. John, the third area you said you've really worked on a lot. Leave it running. John, the third area you've really developed a lot. I really don't like the word a lot.
Why don't you start with like the word and, since we're
And
you know, you say and
then
third area, John. Blah,
And the third area you've worked on a lot, developing the accuracy. Oh, take 4.
How about just the other area that you brought up?
All right, that sounds good. I'll use that. Can you write this next time, and we'll do it that way. It'll be easier. I have to flat out teach a class tomorrow.
Looking at
Yeah.
John,
What time are you
saying
leaving?
something very serious. Yeah, Yep.
Let me do it for serious here. Hang on.
Okay. Now do it like, oh, that was interesting.
Okay. Flows. Let's try to keep this at like 5 to 8 minutes. Try to roll right through it. Okay.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I am
Not really get into depth on stuff.
Okay.
I don't think we really need to. He-Man class covers this, this, and this. This would be an awesome rifle for it. It's a 308. Here's the sights. Blah 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 blah. Okay. Maybe 10 minutes.
Trey, Trey, give me the bar.
That's not a really good pose, sir, John.
Okay.
Did you see yourself?
I'm keeping my hands away from my body.
Oh.
No.
Otherwise, I know it, I'll touch myself.
This is kind of cool. Look at me.
Yeah.
They cut my waist off.
Okay, Matt, you're going to camera 3, Jason's camera if you need to.
And doing what?
I mean, if you need to.
Where are we going now, with the rod?
Camera.
Yeah, we're gonna go clean the top end. I guess the first thing we need to do is pull this out. Tell them to scrub that area. Well, no. We'll leave it in there. We'll pull it out.
Yeah, you want to do that after, actually, after you clean the barrel and then you mop the chamber out.
Well, then you need to tell me these things.
Okay.
All righty.
In terms of his digital part.
Matt, the wide shot is now Jason. That's the camera you're addressing. And John, you're just talking to Matt. Recording again.
I hit that one perfect.
Yeah.
And action.
Seems to start talking on camera.
It only takes 6 lines for you to shut up for me long enough to talk.
I get I get the 6-second intro.
You know, I'm not going to say anything about that, Kevin.
If you just keep
I'll
do
keep
buzzing
prodding you.
questions.
I'll keep prodding you. Don't worry about it. Talk to me. Don't worry about the camera.
Oh no, that's no problem.
Talk to Tom's camera and whatever.
Hi, Tom. You're back again.
Yep.
You know, I never talk to Trey's camera.
You don't want to.
Oh.
Even today, watching you and Kevin working together, it was interesting to see, despite that Kevin's an efficient and practical shooter.
Start over.
Right.
What?
You didn't see him today. This is the.
Okay.
That would have been a great lead-in.
That was,
I didn't know that.
That would have been a killer lead-in. Yeah, but yeah, this is film. This is on disc 1.
Oh, okay.
You never saw Kevin.
I see with most dumb new shooters,
Ready?
not Kevin. Guys like, boy, I expect Kevin to shoot tomorrow.
We're here with Mark Buchanan from. That was a really loud rifle. God damn. All right, outtake. Okay.
It's a wrap.